catheter, and again you have to keep the catheter for a very long period, like for 2 to 3 weeks. We keep the patient catheterized, and then we gradually remove one catheter and later on the second catheter. Okay. When you are going for the abdominal approach, again you have to take into consideration that when you are excising the edges of the fistula, there shouldn't be any traction in your apposition. When you are opposing the two walls, then the traction should be avoided. So for, if you find that there is little bit of traction in the suture line, you have to mobilize the bladder. So always mobilize the bladder so that little bit space is created for the suture lines, so there is no traction when you are approximating the two edges. And tension free closure should be there. The closure should be in layers, and then catheter should be inserted. Now, what are the various procedures for the management of vesicovaginal fistula? Um, the one was the vaginal procedure that was known as the flap splitting method, and one is the Latsko procedure, in which we do partial colpoclesis, and then the interposition by the flaps or grafts. It could be a labial fat pad, which is known as the Martius graft, or it could be a gracilis muscle graft. And in abdominal procedures, it can be transperitoneal transvesical repair, where the bladder is bisected and then repaired in layers, and then omental grafts is inserted. And if the rent is very large, then you can go for urinary diversion, particularly in cases of post radiation. If there is a fistula formation, and if it is a malignancy, because of that the fistula formation is there, in these cases surgery repair by surgical procedure is not good, and in that cases we better go for urinary diversion. You will reposit the ureter into the ileum, so that the urine is now drained via the anal aid opening, okay, in through the feces. Now, post-operative management. In the post-operative management, again, the catheter should be kept for 10 to 14 days. Antibiotics should be given. Adequate hydration should be given. And only main concern is your success of surgery depends upon the post-operative management, that the catheter should not get blocked. So make sure that you have inserted two catheter and the catheter is draining the urine very well. And if you find that there is any blockage, if it is there, you should notice it. And if it is possible that suprapubic catheter, you cannot change it again. But if it is a urethral catheter, you can change the urethral catheter and insert another catheter if you find that there is blockage because of some blood clots or because of anything else. Okay. Now, the next thing is vesicouterine fistula. Now, vesicouterine fistula, it is very rare. Usually, we are encountering this vesicovaginal fistula in our day-to-day practice. However, if it is a vesicouterine fistula, in that cases, the characteristic feature will be that when the patient will be having her menses, she will be complaining of blood in her urine also. So apart from the leakage of urine, there will be menuria, that is blood coming in the urine during menstruation. So here the treatment depends upon only the abdominal approach is possible. So you will repair via your abdominal route. Next is anal sphincter injury and rectovaginal fistula. Now, sphincter injury, this is usually seen when you are going for a normal delivery and you have not given a proper perineal support to the patient. So the rectovaginal area, it gets avulsed, and you find that 3rd and 4th degree perineal tear is there. Usually 1st and 2nd degree perineal tear never leads to anal sphincter injury and rectovaginal fistula. Okay. So and also if you are going for a normal vaginal delivery and you are applying forceps, this is a very characteristic complication of forceps delivery, that lower the support of the perineal area is weakened when you are applying pressure over the forceps to deliver the head out, and at that moment the lower wall gets give way, and the patient develops this fistula and perineal tear. Okay. Now, what are the various types of anal sphincter injury? The anal sphincter injury is again of 4 degrees. The first degree is only the perineal skin over the anal area is avulsed. In the second degree, apart from the perineal skin and muscles, the muscles are also involved, but not the anal sphincter. In third degree, it involves the anal sphincter complex also. Now, again, in third degree, it depends upon it 3A, 3B, and 3C. In 3A, less than 50% of the anal sphincter is involved, external sphincter is involved. And in 3B, more than 50% of the external sphincter is involved. And in 3C, both internal as well as external sphincter is involved. Now, in fourth degree, whole sphincter complex and the anal mucosa is involved. So anal sphincter injury can be of these four grades. And apart from that, rectovaginal fistula also develops. If it is a rectovaginal fistula, again, it is classified into three types. One is low rectovaginal fistula. Here, the vaginal opening is very near to the posterior fourchette. In mid rectovaginal fistula, the vaginal opening is above the fourchette but below the cervix. And in high rectovaginal fistula, the vaginal opening is in the posterior fornix. Now, when anybody asks about the etiology of this sphincter and anal sphincter injury, the most common cause is obstetric injury. Okay, so the most common cause is obstetric injury while you are going for the delivery. And other causes of rectovaginal fistula is, first of all, it could be congenital, and in obstetric, it could be fourth degree tear, or it could be a median episiotomy, or it could be a instrumental vaginal delivery, injury via instrumental vaginal delivery. That is, I have already told you about the forceps delivery. Next is any gynecological surgery in which there is trauma to that particular area. And in cases of infections or inflammations, particularly diverticulitis and Crohn's disease. And lastly, malignancy and post-operative irradiation when you are giving for any malignant procedures. What are the clinical features of an rectovaginal fistula? If the patient is having this rectovaginal fistula, the typical presentation is the passage of flatus and stool through the vagina, or there is incontinence of the flatus and feces. Rectal bleeding, diarrhea, and other symptoms of diverticulitis or Crohn's disease may be present. Vaginal and rectovaginal examination will reveal an old complete perineal tear or a fistulous opening. Very small fistula can be visualized by instilling air into the rectum. However, endoscopy and biopsy is required if you are suspecting malignancy. In women with anal sphincter injury, the severity of the sphincter damage should be assessed during your rectal examination. Then only you will plan your management. So basically what will happen, the patient will complain of only incontinence of flatus and feces, and there is passage of flatus or stool through the vagina, and any associated if there is associated malignancy, then other features of malignancy will also be present apart from all these symptoms. On examination, per rectal examination, you will see on vaginal and rectal, you can see the rent, or you can see the vaginal opening, a small rent in the vaginal opening through which the feces is coming out, and then you will evaluate it by your endoscopy or biopsy. Now, what are the surgical procedures for rectovaginal fistula? If it is a very low rectovaginal fistula, then it can be repaired by transvaginal repair, or you can convert it into a complete perineal tear and then repair it, or it could be a transanal repair, or it could be a bioprosthetic interposition graft repair. If it is a mid or high rectovaginal fistula, here abdominal approach is done. Here, abdominal approach should be done with bowel resection, without bowel resection, or you can use labial graft, that is known as the Martius graft. Now, basically, what we do here, in our cases, we usually get a lower rectovaginal fistula. That is basically a complication during your vaginal delivery when you have not supported the vaginal wall posteriorly very well, and because of that, it has given way. So in this case, what we do, we first convert it into a third degree perineal tear. Then what we do, we separate the anal mucosa from the vaginal mucosa. And then first of all, you will repair the anal mucosa first. Okay. And after repairing the anal mucosa and up till the sphincter, you will repair it. And then you will do the approximation of the vaginal wall. Also the rectal after the rectal mucosa and the anal mucosa is repaired, you will repair the vaginal wall, and then the perineal muscles will be repaired, and you will form your perineal body over there. Now, again, the success of your surgery depends upon the post-operative management, because you know that this area of your surgery will be soiled by the feces. So because of contamination, there is chances of infection in the suture line. So you will keep the patient nil by mouth before surgery and also after surgery. If you are suspecting that a little bit of high fistula is there, means a little bit of rectal mucosa is also involved apart from the anal canal, and if you are planning for a vaginal approach, then before going for the vaginal approach, we usually we keep the patient nil by mouth for 2 days. The entire vaginal wall the rectum should be cleaned from the feces. So you will give Peg-Leg or any laxative so that all the feces is washed out from the GI tract. And then you will give IV antibiotics to that patient also. And to make sure that your surgery is 100% successful, we usually go for colostomy. Okay, so whatever feces, because even if you keep the patient nail by mouth, because of some bilious secretions and all, little bit of feces is still formed even after the patient is kept nail by mouth. So that part of the is completely dry, so that will help in healing of your surgical wound. So we usually do that. And if the patient is not giving consent for colostomy, and she wants repair to be done vaginally, so you'll explain the risk to that patient. And in that cases also, what we do, we give Peg-Leg to that patient so that the entire GI tract is cleaned from the feces, and then you will repair the vaginal and the anal area. And after that, you will keep that patient nail by mouth for another 7 to 10 days. So, and after that also, when she will start her taking her normal diet, she should take semi-solid diet only, and you will add laxative to that patient so that whatever stool is getting formed, it should be very soft, so that it will not create any pressure over the suture line. So post-operative management is very important in when you are doing repair, whether it is a vaginal repair or an abdominal repair, and whether it is a rectovaginal fistula or it is a vesicovaginal fistula. So these are the things you should kept in mind. And basically in your exams, it is not asked in your exams. Hardly you will get a question on fistula, genital fistula. If at all you get a answer the question in your exams, then you can just tell the clinical features, the how will you make the diagnosis by the dye test, how will you make the diagnosis, and in the treatment part, what are the procedures, abdominal and the vaginal procedures, both the procedures, and the post-operative management part, you will mention it in your answer. That is very important, because that only will tell us that you people have understood. Okay, thank you for your patience hearing. Shashikant, please take the attendance.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.